Hey team, it's Andy Wang from Clarico, and in this video, I'm going to show you how to split expenses between your different clinics using tracking categories. Now, this process does assume that you already have your tracking categories set up for each location or clinic. So for example, if you've got 3 clinics, then in the tracking categories, you would have Clinic 1, Clinic 2, and Clinic 3 set up. You might also decide to have a general HQ/admin tracking category set up as well as like a fourth or as another clinic to allocate those expenses that don't belong anywhere else. So this process is really good for those of you who run multiple clinics out of one company, but you want to be able to see your general expenses spread across all the clinics. This process also assumes that you run a separate bank account for each location, which you use to receive all of the income for that location, and you spend that location's expenses out of that bank account too. So for example, if I have a location called Knobbly Knees Are Us, then I will have a bank account specifically for that location, Knobbly Knees Are Us, and that bank account will receive all the income from that location and spend the expenses to pay the practitioners from that location as well. This process is useful if you have expenses that your business incurs that isn't a result of any one clinic, but you want to see the costs split between the clinics regardless. So for example, expenses like maybe admin professional development or your business cards and welcome packs. It's pretty hard to tie that down to any one clinic. So you might want to split that expense between your different clinics so when you run the profit and loss reports for each clinic, you will see its allocated expense in that profit and loss. So essentially it assigns these costs between the various clinics so you can run a profit and loss report for each clinic. I do recommend doing this process at the end of every month. So let's jump into it. In terms of the process itself, step number 1, you want to run your profit and loss for all your unassigned items. So these are our clinics that we have set up: Crunchy Rotator Rehab, our general HQ/admin, and Niggly Knees Are Us. So I want to run the report for all our unassigned expenses, and I'll hit update. What Xero now shows me is, hey, here are all of my expenses for the month of August, which have not been assigned to a specific clinic, hence the unassigned. Step number 2 is in a separate tab, we want to open up the manual journals. So you go to accounting and click manual journals. I normally right click and click open, link in new tab. Here's one I prepared earlier. Step number 3 is for each item, you want to split between the clinics, make a manual journal and split and tag the clinic. Let's run through it together. So I'll click the new journal button. And the reason I open up 2 tabs is so it makes switching between the 2 to see the numbers a lot easier. If you wanted, you could split this across the screen as well, half on each side. So like I said, I recommend running this at the end of every month. So let's assume it's the end of August. And I'll call this Global Expenses Split Between Clinics. And it'll be dated at the end of the month. So the first thing we want to do is split the expenses. So the first one we'll split is this admin professional development. Let's say it's $1,500 and we want to split that evenly between our 2 clinics. The first thing we want to do is actually reduce the expense itself out of the unassigned clinic. So we want to credit that by $1,500. Anytime you're dealing with an expense and it's a positive number in the expense section, so it's not in brackets in here, that means it's a positive expense essentially, the way an expense should be, as long as it's being shown in the expenses section. To reduce the number, we want to put it into the credit section. So in this case, if we want to say to Xero, hey, get this $1,500 out of admin professional development unassigned, we are saying, okay, the account is admin professional development, the clinic is unassigned, no clinic there, and by putting the $1,500 into the credit section, we are reducing it by $1,500. Next step is to increase the clinics that we want to track it against. So in this case, we want half to go to Crunchy Rotator Rehab and half to Niggly Knees Are Us. So in here, I simply put 1,500 divided by 2. And Xero will do a calculation for us. And I'll just repeat this process for Niggly Knees Are Us. There we go. So essentially what these three lines do is the first line reduces the admin professional development costs against the unassigned clinic by $1,500. The second line increases the admin professional development cost against the Crunchy Rotator Rehab clinic by $750. And the third line increases the admin professional development cost against the clinic Niggly Knees Are Us by $750. Let's try it with, say, the business cards and welcome packs to $500. So same deal. We look for the account business cards and welcome packs. We reduce it by $500. And then we increase the clinics by half each. There we go. So once again, we're reducing the business cards and welcome packs against unassigned by 500 and splitting that against Crunchy Rotator and Niggly Knees by 250 each. What if you don't want to split things perfectly 50-50? So for example, this practitioner professional development is meant to be split 2/3 to one clinic and 1/3 to the other. Super simple. So let's type in practitioner professional development, and we want to reduce the overall amount, which has not been assigned, by the full amount, 1,600, which we have there. And we want to, for example, say Crunchy Rotator incurs 2/3 of the cost. 1,600 divided by 3 times by 2. And the rest goes to Niggly Knees. And you can see it's been split like that. What I also like to do is also have a HQ/admin option as well. So let's just say the consulting and accounting of $2,000 doesn't actually relate to any one clinic, but it's just a general cost against the admin side. Maybe it's a service entity cost, or it's just an admin expense in general. If that's the case, you can simply reduce the cost which has been unassigned and put it back in against this HQ admin. That's why I do like to have a HQ admin tracking category, in case there are those costs that really don't make sense to be assigned or spread amongst the clinics. And that's it. Simply click post once you're done. All right, now that's posted, let's look at what we've achieved. Remember, this was the old view where we're seeing all the expenses which have not been assigned. Now, if I update this report, you can see that a lot of the expenses are now disappeared. Why? Because they're no longer unassigned. They've been assigned against Crunchy Rotator Rehab, HQ Admin, or Niggly Knees Are Us. So let's have a look at them. You can see here is the profit and loss for Crunchy Rotator Rehab for the month of August. And here are the expenses. So half of the admin professional development, half of the business cards, and 2/3 of the practitioner professional development. Let's see the Niggly Knees. And you can see here is the profit and loss for just Niggly Knees. And finally, let's check out the HQ Admin. and here's the $2,000 in HQ admin. So that's how you split the global/general expenses against multiple clinics. So in terms of the process itself, the benefit here is that you get to see a pretty close to accurate true profit and loss where all of your expenses are allocated against all the clinics or against a global/admin clinic, for lack of a better term. The only drawback here is that this can be time consuming. So for example, if you go back to all of our expenses, remember that we actually have a bit of a list here. That's why I recommended doing this once a month. Any more frequently than that, you might be doing it too frequently, but any longer than that, you might be dealing with quite a hefty profit and loss because you need to actually go through and split up each one of these. But the thing is, if you're large enough that this needs to be done and you have enough clinics, then it may actually be worth your while to get that visibility over your reporting for each clinic. And this is something that you can always get a bookkeeper to help on. So absolutely get in touch with your bookkeeper, or if you don't have one, feel free to reach out to us and if that's something you're interested in, and we can help as well. So just to recap, run your profit and loss for your untagged items is step number 1. In a separate tab, open up manual journals as step number 2. And in step number 3, you just want to split the costs against each clinic within the manual journal. I hope this has been useful for you, and if there's any questions, please reach out.